The Supreme Court appeared ready this week to strike down the Defense of Marriage Act during yesterday's oral arguments. But it was a different story for Prop 8, with justices signaling that they may take a narrow approach to avoid setting a national precedent on the issue of same-sex marriage in that California proposition. California Attorney General Kamala Harris refused to defend Prop 8 before the court, but was there certainly for the proceedings and joins me now. General Harris, great to see you again. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Andrew.
Bring me up to date on what your impression coming out of the Supreme Court argument yesterday. Rather, it was Tuesday.
Tuesday. You know, a number of thoughts. One, that obviously the court is acknowledging that 14 times in the history of the court since the 1880s. It has recognized marriage as a fundamental right, and so there was some discussion of that. And I believe, and it's certainly our position, that this case, what they do with Prop 8 and what they do with DOMA, should be consistent with those 14 other cases, which has described marriage as a fundamental right and therefore entitled to great protection. The other point is on the issue of standing, and in the Prop 8 case, in particular, the point that we have made that I think the court will hopefully appreciate is that the proponent of Prop 8, his life will not change. His life will not be impacted by allowing same-sex couples to marry. And for that reason, he really has no stake in the outcome of the case. And for that reason, he should not be allowed to bring the case on appeal to the United States Supreme Court. On DOMA, I think that Justice Ginsburg was brilliant in just simplifying it and bringing the point down to a very basic one that I think all people can understand, that we're creating two systems here, one full marriage and then the other skim milk marriage, and we'd have to have a really good reason to treat people differently when it comes to what otherwise should be entitled, what should be an equal protection. And I hope that the court is going to, in the end, recognize that, as we have recognized in California, 61% of Californians are in favor of same-sex marriage. The majority of Americans and Catholics are in favor of same-sex marriage. And it is important that we continue on the path, as this country has acknowledged, that we have to be dedicated to equal rights and equal protection under the law.
Justice Kennedy, who arguably could be a key vote on this case, on the case of Prop 8, did voice skepticism about standing, about jurisdiction. This was part of his comment.
You're really asking, particularly because of the sociological evidence you cite, for us to go into uncharted waters. I just wonder if the case was properly granted.
And that brings me to the point, Attorney General Harris, that it's conceivable that they will simply decide it on a very narrow basis, and the Prop 8 could be overturned, but it will not be a national precedent for the rest of the country.
Well, I know there has been some talk of that, and my perspective is pretty simple. The majority of Americans, the President of the United States, the former President of the United States, the former Secretary of State, leaders of Fortune 500 companies, as well as athletes, so many have weighed in on this issue in a way that makes it clear that this is not a controversial issue for most of America. And it is important that the highest court in the land declare that treating two groups of people differently on the basis of their sexual orientation is simply not going to cut it when we read the Constitution and understand that we have to be dedicated to equal rights for all people, regardless of their orientation.
You know, it does seem at times, listening to the audio of the argument on Prop 8 and also on DOMA, that, well, first of all, on Prop 8, though, principally, that the liberals as well as the conservatives on the court seem to be trying to find a way out of, going too far in this, because the liberals may fear that if they pushed it, to the obvious conclusion that they would not have the votes. So perhaps they're looking for a much smaller step initially to avoid having some kind of ruling that will set a precedent that they don't support.
I don't think there's such a thing, and I don't think we can allow such a conversation as a small step towards equality. We either step toward equality or we don't. And that's just the bottom line here. There is a real significance to the passage of time. As I've said before, 50,000 California children are asking why can't their parents be married too. 18,000 California families who were married in California want to be recognized as being married for the purposes of receiving federal benefits. And a day in the life of each of these guys is a very long time. There's no time to wait. We can't tell people to wait for their civil rights and their equal rights.
Kamala Harris, the Attorney General from California, the state of California, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Andrea.